So we are in the second part, in the second session of Edward Albee's Zoo Story, which is a play in one scene. Edward Albee calls it a play in one scene. It's a one-act play. Well, in the first session, this is what we saw. Well, the play is set in the Central Park of the New York City. Well, we can see Peter, who is a clean-cut man in his mid-40s. He's sitting on a bench, reading something and smoking a pipe. Well, in this situation, Jerry, a young man in his 30s, approaches him. He's a carelessly dressed man. Now, without any provocation, Jerry tells Peter that he is coming from the zoo. He also asks Peter to confirm that he is going north. Now, Peter complies. He agrees. But Peter is not interested in the conversation. But Jerry continues to talk to him. He goes on talking. He also warns Peter that he will probably get cancer from the pipe that he is smoking. Well, he looks for a word for the artificial jaw that people get when they have mouth cancer. Well, Peter suggests prosthesis. He gives the word, Peter supplies the word prosthesis. Now from this, well, Jerry concludes that Peter is educated. Jerry asks Peter if they can talk. Now, Peter unwillingly, reluctantly, he agrees. Jerry understands that Peter is not willing to listen to him. But he repeatedly tells him that he is coming from the zoo. I am from the zoo. I have been to the zoo, he says. Now, Peter, gets irritated, but he tries to make himself friendly and amiable. We learned that Peter has a wife. He is married. He has 2 daughters, and he has 2 parakeets, and he also has 2 cats at home. And he seems to enjoy a normal upper middle class life. Upper middle class life. Now, Jerry asks whether he would prefer having sons, because Peter says he has 2 daughters. But Jerry asks him if he would like to have sons. Then Peter says, well, yes, he says he would. And then he becomes a little bit offended. Peter becomes a little bit offended when Jerry insinuates that Peter cannot have more children, more sons. It is your wife. It is your wife. Jerry says, but he becomes a little bit irritated, and he Peter forces himself to calm down. Then Jerry says, he very rarely he talks to people, but when he gets someone to talk to, well, he goes on asking. He goes on asking questions. He tries to know everything about people that he does talk to. Well, it makes him a little bit uncomfortable, because somebody asking questions, a stranger coming and asking questions, it makes you uncomfortable. Then they talk about Peter's pets. Then Jerry says, Jerry means that Peter has got emasculated by his wife and daughter, because Peter wanted to have dogs, but because of his wife and daughter's insistence, well, they have cats at home. Then Jerry then subjects Peter to a series of rapid fire questions. He asks him, goes on asking him about questions, where he lives, about his job, his income, his favorite authors. We understand that Peter is an executive. He's a business executive at a publishing firm, and he earns a very, very comfortable salary, and he lives on the Upper East Side of New York. Well, this is where I think we stopped yesterday, and at one point, Peter felt that he was becoming patronizing. Now, was I patronizing? He asks. That is, Peter asks Jerry, was I patronizing? I believe I was, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for for patronizing. But you see, your question about the classes, because Jerry talked about the classes. Well, this is one of the themes. This is one of the themes of the play, the class difference, the social class difference, because Jerry says, what is the dividing line between the upper middle class and the lower middle class? So the class difference, the class struggle of the modern American society is one of the themes of this play. Well, my dear fellow, he wants to say something. Then don't my dear fellow me, don't call me like that. Don't my dear fellow me. Then Peter, he becomes unhappy a little bit. Was I patronizing? Peter asks. I believe I was. Then I am sorry. But you see, your question about the classes bewildered me. I don't like it. It has irritated me. Then Jerry says, well, when you are bewildered, you become patronizing. Well, you become like a man who is superior to me. You start advising me. You become my patron. You start patronizing. Then he becomes very much conscious. Jerry becomes very much conscious of the class difference. Then Peter, I don't express myself too well. Well, I am not a good conversationist. Sometimes I can't. Well, he attempts to joke. I am in publishing, not in writing, because I am not a good conversationist. I can't. I don't talk well. I don't speak well, and so that is why I chose the profession in publishing, not writing. Then Jerry becomes amused, but not at the humor. So be it. The truth is, I was being patronizing, he says. Now, Peter, no, you needn't say that. Now, at this point, Jerry starts moving about the stage with slowly increasing determination and authority. So he was standing there. Now, at this point, he starts moving up and down on the stage, but pacing himself so that the long speech, because after some time, after a little while, he's going to deliver a long speech about dog. Now, Jerry, all right, who are your favorite writers? Well, you are an educated man. Peter is Jerry understands that Peter is an educated man. Now, can you tell me who are your favorite authors? Baudelaire, the French writer, or J.P. Marquand, the American writer? Now, who are your favorite authors? Is it Baudelaire, the French writer, or Marquand, the American writer? Now, Peter, very wary, means very careful. Well, I like a great many writers. I have many, I like many writers. I have considerable catholicity of taste. Well, I'm not very strict. I'm not a fundamentalist as far as reading is concerned. I have, a liberal attitude. Well, I like, anything that is good. a Catholicity of taste, if I may say so. Those two men are fine. The writers that you mentioned, they are okay. Baudelaire and Marquand, they are fine. Each in his own way, they are good writers. Now he warms himself up. Baudelaire, the French writer, of course, is by far the finer of the two. Now, if you ask me, who is better? Is it Baudelaire or J.P. Marquand? Well, I would say Baudelaire is finer. But Marquand, our writer, American writer, our national writer, he has a place in our national heart. Well, he has a place. He's also a very good writer. But I feel that Baudelaire is a finer writer, a better writer than Jerry. Skip it, because he is not interested in the talk, because he is not an educated man, because he's very much conscious of, he's very, very aware of the class difference. Peter is highly educated, and Jerry is not much educated. Their backgrounds are completely different. Now skip it. Oh, I'm sorry. He understands. He understands the situation. Peter understands the situation. Jerry, do you know what I did before I went to the zoo today? Now again, he comes back to the topic of the zoo. Do you know what I did before I went to the zoo today? Now he says, I walked all the way. I walked all the way up the 5th Avenue from Washington Square. All the way I walked. I walked a long, long way. Well, remember the class difference. Well, he didn't travel by bus. He didn't travel by car. He said he walked all the way. Now, Peter, oh, you live in the village. Look at the difference. The socio-economic problem is being brought to the forefront. Oh, you live in the village. The divide, the great social divide of the American society between the urban and the village, the city and the village. Well, that is a big problem in American society. Oh, you live in the village. Now this seems to enlighten Peter. Now Jerry, no, I don't. I don't live in the village. Now he says, he tells him about how he walked. I took the subway. The road, the crossing that is beneath the road, the subway, down to the village. I took the subway. So I could walk all the way up the 5th Avenue to the zoo. Now, that way, I chose that way because I could walk comfortably to the 5th Avenue to the zoo. Now, it is one of those things a person has to do. What? That's he talks about in life. These are lessons from life. Because he's a poor man, he walks, he lives, he says, though he's not living in the village, well, he's from the village. Well, sometimes a person has to go a long distance out of the way. For what? To come back a short distance correctly. These are lessons that he learned in his life. Now Peter, almost pouting like this. He just protrudes his lower lip like this. Now pouting. Oh, I thought you lived in the village. Like this. I thought you lived in the village. Now Jerry, what were you trying to do? Now when I came here, when we met, what were you trying to do? You were trying to make sense out of things. You were trying to understand things. You were trying to put things in order, bring order. The old pigeonhole bit, you were trying to categorize things. You were trying to classify things. Well, that is easy. I'll tell you. Now he tries to tell him about his background, about his social background, where he lives, and he gives a description of his own house. Well, I live in a 4-story brownstone rooming house. This is where he lives. A brownstone. It is not a plastered, a polished and a painted house. It is a 4-story building, brownstone rooming house. It is like, a rented place, where a building in which so many people live for rent. So it is a rented house, a brownstone rooming house on the upper west side between Columbus Avenue and the Central Park West. He says, I live on the top floor. Well, rear, backside, west. It is a laughably small room. It is not a big room. I live in a very, very small room. It is very pitiable. It's in a miserable condition. Laughably small room. And one of my walls is made of beaver board. Really, the fiber board that is used for partitioning rooms. The beaver board. My room, one of the walls is not a brick and cement, wall. It is made of beaver board, made of fiber board. Well, this beaver board separates my room from another laughably small room. Now, this beaver board, this fiber board, it separates my room from another room. So I assume that the two rooms were one room. So it was one big room. It is divided into two. A small room, but not necessarily laughable. The room beyond my beaver board is a wall occupied by a colored queen. Look, so in the next room, there lives a man whom he calls a colored queen. Well, this is a slur, an insinuation that he uses for, the black people, a black man, a colored queen, who always keeps his door open. That colored queen, the black man. Well, not always, but always when he is plucking his eyebrows. When he is plucking his eyebrows, he keeps his doors open, which he does with Buddhist concentration. That is plucking the eyebrows. He does it, with a lot of concentration. This colored queen has rotten teeth. Oh, he has an ugly teeth, an ugly mouth, which is rare. I have never seen it. And he has a Japanese kimono, kimono, that loose a garment, that tight-fitting garment with a loose sleeve and with a sash on the body. Well, that kimono, he uses a Japanese kimono, which is also pretty rare. So he has a dirty, rotten teeth, and he wears a kimono, that colored queen, and he wears this kimono to and from the John in the hall. Whenever he visits the store, the shop, well, he goes in that kimono, which is pretty frequent. That is, he goes to the store frequently. I mean, he goes to the John. He goes to the store a lot. He never bothers me. He doesn't care for me, and never brings anyone up to his room. Well, he always comes and goes alone. All he does is, this is the only thing that he does, that he plucks his eyebrows. He wears his kimono and go to the John. These are the only things that he does, the colored queen. Now, the two front rooms on my floor are a little larger. The other two, the front one, I live in the rear, in the back. The front rooms are a little larger, I guess. But they are pretty small too. And there is another family. What is that family? A Puerto Rican family from the Caribbean island of, it's a mixture of various people, different races. Well, he's a poor American, Jerry, and there is a black man, and now here is a Puerto Rican family in one of them. Well, a husband and a wife, and some kids. I don't know how many, because I don't bother. These people, they entertain themselves a lot. And in the other front room, there is somebody living there, but I don't know who it is. Because these people, it's a conglomeration. It's a mixture of different races and nationals, and because it's a city, and it is in one of the poorest locations. It is not a very, an elite society. It is not an elite area. It's a very, very, backward area in the New York, at the rear, at the back of the New York, in its periphery. I don't know who it is. So there are a lot of people and a lot of different types of different kinds of people living in a single room, and they don't know each other. I have never seen who it is. Never, 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 he says. Now Peter, a little bit embarrassed. Why? He doesn't understand, because he belongs to the upper middle class society. He's an elite. He belongs to the elite class. So he doesn't understand why. If it's a dirty place, now why do you live there? This is what he asks. This is what Peter asks. Now why do you live there? Then Jerry, from a distance, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I am living there. Then Peter, it doesn't sound a very nice place. It doesn't sound a nice place. Where you live, I mean. Now Jerry, well, no. It isn't an apartment. It is not a flat. Because the place where you live is an apartment. It's a flat. It's a high-class society. But this is not an apartment. This is a poor lodging. It isn't an apartment in the East 70s. But then again, like you, I don't have a wife. You have a wife, 2 daughters, 2 cats, 2 parakeets. You maintain a family. You are a very, you belong to the social high class, a high class man. But I don't have a family. Then why should I go for an apartment? I don't have 1 wife, 2 daughters, 2 cats, and 2 parakeets. What I do have, now these are the only things that I have. I have toilet articles, a few clothes, a hot plate that I am not supposed to have, a can opener, a bottle opener, one that works with a key. I have a knife, 2 forks, and 2 spoons, 1 small and 1 large, 2 spoons, 3 plates, a cup, a saucer, a drinking glass, 2 picture frames. Look, 2 picture. So he has all these things: clothes, a hot plate, a can opener, drinking glass, 2 picture frames. 2 frames he has, but they are empty, without any pictures. That's very interesting. So there are no photos. There are no pictures. Only 2 empty frames. 8 or 9 books I have. And also, look at the very interesting thing. A pack of pornographic playing cards. I have a pack of playing cards with, pictures of sexual acts, pornographic pictures. A regular deck, an old Western Union typewriter. I have a typewriter that prints nothing. It is almost a damaged typewriter, an old one, an old dilapidated typewriter. It prints nothing but capital letters, no small letters, because it is faulty. It has some problem. And a small, strong box I have, without a lock. It doesn't have a lock, that box. Which has in it what? Now, what does it contain, that strong box? It contains rocks. It is full of rocks. It is filled with rocks. Some rocks, sea-rounded rocks. The rocks that I collected from the beach. I picked up on the beach when I was a kid, when I was a child. Under which, weighed down, under the rocks, under the pebbles that I collected, weighed down are some letters. There are some letters. Please, letters, please. Why don't you do this? Please, when will you do that, letters? And when letters too? When will you write? When will you come? When? These letters are from more recent years. When? What does it mean? Peter, he stares glumly at his shoes, and then, about those two, empty picture frames. You talked about two picture frames that they were empty. Then Jerry, I don't see why they need any explanation at all. Isn't it clear? Now, from what I have said, isn't it clear to you that why the picture frames are empty? Why they are not filled with pictures? I don't have pictures of anyone to put in them. Well, I don't have anyone. I have no relatives. I have, no friends, no relatives. I am alone. I am a lonely man. I don't have pictures of anyone to put in them. Then Peter inquires, because he doesn't understand the life of a lower middle class man, a poor man in the village. It is very, very difficult for him to understand. Then Peter asks him, what about your parents? Perhaps a girlfriend? Jerry, you are a very sweet man. You are a nice man. You are possessed of a truly enviable innocence. An innocent man, a poor man who knows nothing about the life of about the poor people. But good old mom, my mother, and good old pop, my father, what happened to them? They are dead, I am broken up about it. I'm very sad about it. I really mean. But that particular wonderful act of playing the cloud circuit now, well, he's trying to forget his grief of, having lost his parents. So I don't see how I can look at them all neat and framed, because, their story, my story, the story of my story of my mom and my father, well, I don't want to think of that. I don't want to recollect those stories. And so, for the same reason, I don't want to keep their photos framed. Besides, or rather, to be pointed about it, I'll tell you the story of my mom and my dad. My good old man, my good old mom. What happened to my mother? Well, she walked out on my good old pop. She abandoned. She left my father when I was 10.5 years old, in my childhood, when I was a child. She abandoned. She left. She walked out on my father. She embarked on an illicit relationship, an illegal relationship, an adulterous turn of our southern states. Well, she ran away with another man. A journey of a year's duration for 1 year. And her most constant companion, it was an extramarital affair. Among many others, well, she had a relationship with many men, but she ran away with, my mom ran away with one man, was Mr. Barleycorn, that's his name. At least that is what my good old pop, my father, told me after he went down, and then came back, brought her body north. Well, she was dead. We had received the news between Christmas and the New Year's, and you see that a good old mom had parted with the ghost. She died in some dirty place, a dumping area in Alabama. And without the ghost, well, without the body, well, she was less welcome, I mean. What was she? So he lost his mother. Now, a northern stiff. At any rate, good old pop, what about his father? Celebrated the new year for an even 2 weeks. And then what happened? Then he slapped into the front of somewhat a moving city omnibus. He walked into the front of a moving omnibus, a bus. He committed suicide. So my mother, she eloped, she ran away with her lover, and she was killed, in some in when some, some strange circumstances we don't know. And my father committed suicide. Well, and then, well, no. Then there was my mom's sister. What type of a lady was my mom's sister? My aunt, my auntie, who was given neither to sin nor the consolations of the bottle. And I moved in on her. My memory of her is slight accepting. Well, I remember still that she did all things doubly. She was a very serious person, not very friendly, very serious. She sleeps, sleeping, eating, working, praying, that's all. She was a peculiar type of woman, my mom's sister. Well, one day she dropped dead. She was found dead. Where? On the stairs to her apartment. That is my apartment. At that time it was my apartment. So my mom's sister was also dead on the afternoon of my high school graduation, when he was a student, when he was in the high school. A terribly Middle European joke, if you ask me. My life, my childhood, it's a joke. Now, Peter, oh my. Well, this story, it's a very, very sad story. Now, Jerry, oh, you're what? But that was a long time ago. And I have no feeling about any of it. Well, I don't have any hard feelings about, any of these things that I care to admit to myself. Perhaps you can see, though, my good old mom and my good old Pope. Well, now you can understand. Now you can understand, can't you, why those photo frames are without pictures. My good old Pope and my good old, they are frameless. What's your name, by the way? They were talking for a long time. Now, but they never got introduced to each other. But now, by the way, what's your name? Your first name? Now, Peter says, I'm Peter. Jerry, I had forgotten to ask you. I am Jerry. Now, Peter, with a slight nervous laugh, hello, Jerry. Now, he nods his hello, like this, hello, like this. And let's say now, what's the point of having a girl's picture? Now, you talked about, keeping the picture of a girlfriend in that photo frame, especially in 2 frames. You talked about it. Well, I have 2 picture frames, you remember? Without pictures in it. I never see the pretty little ladies more than once. Well, I see the ladies only once. I never see them more than once, because he has relations. So he meets ladies only once for some relationship. I never see the pretty little ladies more than once. And most of those ladies wouldn't be caught in the same room with a camera. Well, he has such type of a relationship because he's a city man. He belongs to the lower middle class. He doesn't have no parents, no permanent residence, no home, no relatives. Well, he lives such a life. He meets ladies. He never meets any ladies more than once. Most of them would be caught in the same room with a camera. It's odd, isn't it? It's very strange. And I wonder if it is sad. Now, Peter, the girls? No wonder. If it is sad, I never see the little ladies more than once. I meet them only once. I meet the ladies only once. I have never been able to have sex with, I have never been able to have sex with, make love to anybody more than once. Well, I have a relationship with the ladies, only once. Once, that is it. Oh, wait, for a week and a half, for 1.5 weeks, when I was 15, well, I had, a special, something special, some sort of an experience. I hang my head in shame. I was very, very shameful. I felt very shameful because my puberty, my sexual maturity, it was late. It came very late. I was, he says, homosexual. He says homosexual. I was homosexual. I had a relationship with boys at that time, not girls. I was queer. I was homosexual. Queer, he says. Yes, with the bells ringing, well, celebrating, banners snapping in the wind. And for those 11 days, for 1.5 weeks, I met at least twice a day with the park superintendent's son, the son of the park superintendent. I had a relationship with that boy for 1.5 weeks. He was a Greek boy whose birthday was the same as mine. So, except that, he was a year older than me. I think I was very much in love with him. And maybe just with the sex with the boy. Now that was the jazz of a very, very special hotel, wasn't it? And now, do I love the little ladies really? I love them for about an hour. I love the ladies. I have a relationship with the ladies just for an hour. Peter, well, it's perfect. It seems perfectly simple to me. Well, it's it's nothing strange. For a man like you, I can understand. It's okay. Then Jerry, angry look. Angry. Look, are you going to tell me to get married and have parakeets like you? Are you going to advise me to get married and have, pets at home? Peter, angry himself. Forget the parakeets. Don't insult me. Don't make fun of me by talking about the parakeets. Forget the parakeets. Well, and stay single if you want to. If you don't want to marry, don't marry. Stay single. Yeah, it's no business. It is none of my business. It is no business of mine. I didn't start the conversation in the, about the zoo. The Jerry, all right. I'm sorry. All right. Don't get angry. You're not angry? Peter, no, laughing. No, I'm not angry. Then Jerry, a little bit relieved because he's happy. He feels relieved that Peter is not angry. Well, relieved. Good that you are not angry. Now back to his previous tone. So interesting that you asked me about the picture frames. So you talked to me, you asked me about the picture frames without photos. I would have thought that you would have asked me about the pornographic playing cards. I thought that you would ask me more about the playing cards that had pictures of sexual acts, pornographic pictures at the back. Peter, with a knowing smile, I have seen those cards. I am familiar with those things. Jerry, that is not the point. Then he laughs. I suppose when you were a kid, when you were a child in your childhood, your pals, your friends passed them around, or you had a pack of your own, because in childhood it's quite normal, because boys, they have such pictures with them. Well, Peter, I guess a lot of us did. We did that, Jerry. And you threw them away just before you got married? No, just before you got married, you destroyed all of them? Well, Peter, now look here. I didn't need anything like that when I got older. When I get older, when I marry, I don't need such a pornographic pictures, because that's a different life. Jerry, no? Then Peter embarrassed. I would rather not talk about these things. I don't want to talk about these things, he says. I don't want to talk about the pornographic, the cards. Jerry, so don't. Besides, I wasn't trying to plumb your post-adolescent sexual life. I was not trying to plumb. I was not trying to know. I was not trying to measure your post-adolescent sexual life, your sexual life after, when your later sexual life, that is your married life, hard times. What I wanted to get at is, what I want to know is the value difference. What difference does it make having the playing cards when you are a kid and the pornographic playing cards when you are a child, and having the pornographic playing cards when you are older, when you are a married man? Now, what difference does it make? What value difference does it make? To have pornographic playing cards when you are a child and to have pornographic playing cards when you are older. It is that when you are a kid, when you are a child, you use the pornographic playing cards as a substitute because you don't have any sexual experience when you are a child. So you use the pornographic cards as a substitute for the real experience, the real sex experience. And when you are older, when you are married, when you are older, you use the real you use the real experience as a substitute for the fantasy. So in your childhood, sex is a fantasy because you don't have any sexual experience. But when you are older, you use the real sexual experience for the fantasy. But imagine you would rather hear what happened at the zoo. I'll tell you about what happened at the zoo. Then Peter says, enthusiastic, oh yes, the zoo. Then that's if you, well, I would like, okay, you tell me about what happened at the zoo. So I think we'll call it a day here, shall we?